What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast
with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Welcome to another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and this week we'll take a look at these stories. Ottawa has introduced a new airline passenger bill of rights. It increases fines, makes airlines accountable, and automates a compensation process. But what, if anything, will it really change? We'll talk to an aviation expert for his take.
Well, we've been busy keeping our eyes on the federal workers' strike. Trouble has been brewing in another sector. Flight attendants protested across Canada this week because it turns out they work about 34 hours a month for free. They want to be paid for those hours they work. We spoke to a flight attendant who's also their union president. And if you're someone who counts their steps and finds that goal of 10,000 a day hard to reach, great news. The fitness expert we spoke to says you can do way less and still reap the benefits. She'll tell you what your goal should be. How does $20 million in gold just vanish into thin air? It's a story that doesn't sound like real life. But it is. It's not a movie. It happened at the Toronto airport last week, and no one seems to know how.
But we begin with Canada's public service workers' strike, now entering into its second week with absolutely no sign of settlement in sight. We'll hear from a union member and NDP leader JAGMEET SINGH, who is firmly behind the striking workers. David Jones is with the Public Service Alliance of Canada. We spoke, I guess, last week.
I think it was Friday. I don't know. Was it Monday?
To talk about what it was like. So, David, first of all, thanks for coming back. Let me ask you, you've been out on the picket lines?
Pardon me?
You've been out on the picket lines?
Yes, I have. And there's still a lot of very supportive honking going on, and spirits are high. And we've had the chance to talk to other public servants and see how everybody's feeling. And one of the things that keeps coming up is perhaps a misunderstanding of what the demands are. Now, telework keeps coming up, and I think a lot of Canadians might think that all public servants are expecting to be able to work full-time from home, and that's simply not true. And of course, the pandemic was a big game changer, ushered in innovative, much more efficient ways of doing things than the public service is typically known for. People transformed their homes into government offices, offering an array of services for over 2.5 years until they were suddenly asked to come back into the office for reasons that weren't very clear or didn't make a lot of sense. Productivity's been up, absenteeism down. I guess a lot of us just assumed that with, a view to cutting costs across the board, and we're all taxpayers, all interested in economically sound decisions being made. All of this empty office space that costs an absolute fortune, we just figured that there would be downsizing given the number of people who were willing and able to be able to telework. A real win-win situation. Of course, not everyone can telework based on the nature of their job. Not everyone wants to telework, but we simply want that language enshrined in the collective agreement so that flexibility is there. So for people who, for operational reasons, don't need to be in the office, simply to do the exact same job that they can do from home, which makes no sense, don't have to be all of the time. So we just want that flexibility in there. Now, and there's actually been a lack of transparency as to why this is. If everything makes such sense to have people working from home efficiently, more productively than ever, why bring them back? A lot of people think it's to support businesses that are located near government buildings or to simply justify the cost of this very expensive rental space. Now, the public service is no exception to the labor shortage. We've got a job market that's more competitive than ever. Trying to attract new people is key, and with only three federal government departments figuring in Forbes' top 50 list of employers for 2023, that tells us that a lot of other outfits in the private sector, like the KEG, like IKEA, like universities, like banks, for example, are offering great benefits, including pensions.
I have a question for you, though, David. So you're asking for 2 days, and the government has now said in this letter from the Treasury to Canadians and public servants, they've now said that they're open to reviewing it. They've said that they have not reassessed for a post-pandemic world. They say that they want to ensure that their approach is modern, fair, and supportive of our employees. So do you not feel like there's some leverage there, like that there's some movement that could take place?
I think a lot of people don't understand why they're still reviewing this. We've proven for the past 3 years that things have worked more efficiently than ever. And at this stage, we simply want that language incorporated into the collective agreement, and we don't understand the reluctance to do so.
Okay. Listen, we're going to take a break. We have Jagmeet Singh on the line. David, you can hang on and listen to the conversation if you will. We thank you for your time. Jagmeet Singh is the leader, of course, of the federal NDP, supporting this strike and has been since the get-go. And someone is yelling in the background. I'm guessing that's not in Jagmeet Singh's office.
Maybe that's the baby.
Maybe.
That's my baby.
Is it? Okay.
That's the best.
Let's start off by talking about what that gentleman has said. So he's part of that union. There is an open letter, Mr. Singh, from the Treasury Board. So when we talk about transparency, it seems like the government is being pretty transparent here, are they not?
Well, the issue is that these type of negotiations should happen at the negotiation table. It shouldn't be happening in public. What's been missing in action is the minister. This is 2 years in the making. The workers have been waiting for a contract for over 2 years. So they certainly have not been doing their work up to this point. Workers are at a point where 2 years later, no contract, what are they to do? And their major point of contention is saying that we need wages that keep up with inflation. That's something I want for every worker in this country. I think it's a reasonable thing to ask for. And the fact that it's taken 2 years to get to a fair contract is wrong. And so now what we've asked for in the question period today was to say the Prime Minister needs to get involved personally, make sure that there's a fair contract that's put on the table. It shouldn't be about negotiating in the public. It should be about getting to a fair contract as quick as possible.
So it sounds to me that in gentler terms, you're kind of reiterating what Pierre Poilievre had to say about Montfortier and some of the incompetence being shown by the Treasury Board.
Well, I feel like often with Pierre Poilievre, he likes to just gratuitously attack Liberals just for being Liberals. I want to be very focused, and it's very specific. 2 years waiting for a contract is wrong, that there hasn't been enough work to solve this. This is the largest worker strike in Canada, and to have this serious level of strike and no urgency to solve it is a problem, and that's why we're calling for a very specific solution. We want the Prime Minister to personally show some leadership, do his job, and get a fair contract for these workers.
So, to go back to what you just said, Mr. Singh, the idea about them wanting to get fair wages, cost of living, et cetera. A lot of Canadians, when we asked the question here a few days ago at the beginning of the strike, look at these people, not because they're making all that much money, and I know the union goes out of its way to suggest many of these people are making somewhere between, say, $40,000 or $45,000 and $70,000 a year, but the fact that they have government pensions, that they have cost of living allowances, a lot of Canadians who don't have those benefits are looking at them and not supporting them, and that's been the issue since the get-go. I'm not sure it's getting any better. So what do you say to those Canadians?
I would say those Canadians deserve the same thing. I think that the fight here, anytime a worker fights for fair wages, they set the precedent for what is fair. And what we've seen, and we see again and again, is anytime there is a public sector increase in wages, it helps increase wages for all workers. Anytime workers in general fight for fairness, whether it's for safety in the workplace, it improves the safety conditions for all workers. We see that there's precedents that are set and that it improves the conditions. So I really look at this in solidarity and say, when people look at this and say, we deserve increases or we don't have increases in our wages, I would say workers, they deserve it as well. So let's try to find ways to lift everyone up.
You heard, I don't know if you did hear Mr. Jones or not, talking about telework. That seems to be a part of this agreement or part of this negotiation that's proved to be a bit of an issue. The government says it's willing to let workers stay home, just have them come in a couple of days a week. And again, when we ask the question, people think, well, that seems fairly reasonable. We're not saying come back 5 days a week. Where are you on that?
Well, I think that is something that they can absolutely get to an agreement on. It should be about the work getting done. That's really ultimately what the employer wants to know. Are the targets being hit? Is the work being done? Where the work happens, if it doesn't impact the outcome, shouldn't be a sticking point. And so, again, this is something that the workers and the employer, in this case the government of Canada, need to work out. But really the principle should be what is fair and what gets the job done. We have certain things that need to be accomplished. If the workers can satisfy that, it shouldn't be a sticking point on about where that work happens.
Okay, so let's talk about getting the job done for a second, Mr. Singh. We're on day 7 here. Of course, some workers have already been designated as essential, and they are having to get the job done. If it comes down to it, would you support back-to-work legislation?
No question. We would absolutely not support it. We made it very clear to the Liberals that that should not even be on the table in a discussion of any agreement between us, that we would never support it, and it could be never it could never be assumed in any way that we would support it, and that includes even if it's deemed a confidence vote, we would not be supporting it. So the Liberals understood that. It's not any stipulation on our agreement. We will be opposing it, but it doesn't need to get to that point. To build good labor relations, to build a good working relation between an employer and employee, we should have negotiated agreements, not forcing people back to work.
Okay, except services are being affected. I'm just going to read you a text that came in that says, please tell Mr. Singh, we need our passports.
I agree, and that's why the government needs to quickly settle this, have a fair agreement on the table. They've taken over 2 years to do this. I have no understanding why it could take them more than 2 years to come up with a fair agreement. The fact that it's taken this long is clearly a failure of the minister responsible, Minister Fortier. That's why we've been saying the Prime Minister has to get personally involved to shepherd this through to make sure we get to a fair agreement. This is serious. The Liberals often talk about the respecting workers, to make a big show about being for workers' rights. Well, here's an example of an opportunity to do something about it. People across the country are worried about the cost of inflation and the impact of inflation. Well, the workers that delivered unprecedented help during the pandemic are these public sector workers, these public servants. They deserve respect. They're asking for a contract that's respectful to the cost of living impacts that they're experiencing. Like you mentioned earlier, these are some of the lowest paid workers at the public sector level, and they're saying we just want fairness. I think that's a reasonable thing.
JAGMEET Singh, leader of the federal NDP. Mr. Singh, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
548.
you. Go spend time with that beautiful baby.
Informative,
Interactive,
and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Ottawa has introduced a new airline passenger bill of rights. It increases fines, makes airlines accountable, and automates a compensation process. But what, if anything, will it really change? We'll talk to an aviation expert for his take. Our Transport Minister, Omar Al-Gabra, has announced a long-promised passenger bill of rights as far as airlines are concerned, airline travelers are concerned. Here's some of what he said, and then we'll come back and take a look at this, analyze it, and see how much of this actually will mean anything different. Here you go.
Today, I'm announcing that we are making significant changes to the air passenger rights. Among the new changes, amendments would make compensation the default unless specifically cited as a limited exception. So, in addition to being entitled to a refund, most air passengers will be entitled to financial compensation. Right now, compensation for delays and cancellation is only required for disruptions caused by the airline, and which is not a safety issue. With the new changes, we would be combining the current three categories, which are disruption within the airline's control, within the airline's control but necessary for safety, and outside the control of the airline, into a single category where everyone would be entitled to compensation except for a clear list of exceptions. This means there will be no more loopholes where airlines can claim a disruption is caused by something outside of their control for a security reason when it's not. And it will no longer be the passenger who will have to prove that he or she is entitled to compensation. It will now be the airline that will need to prove that it does not have to pay for it. The changes in the legislation would also include implementing standards of treatment, like paying for your food if your flight is canceled or delayed due, for example, to a snowstorm. Since last summer, we also saw how lost baggage impacted passengers. That's why our proposed changes to the Bill of Rights would put in place new requirements which will be announced in the next few weeks for delayed and lost baggage. We will also require airlines to establish an internal process for dealing with air travel claims, and they will be required to manage passenger complaints within 30 days. Finally, to ensure even greater accountability, we are strengthening the CTA by increasing the maximum fines they can impose from $25,000 to $250,000.
Part of Omar Al-Gabra's announcement today, there are a bunch of questions in here that I think need to be followed up. It's all well and good, and we've talked about this before, to finally say we're going to make things work. We know how bad things have been in the past. That part about luggage getting lost, that was a summer or so ago. So let's try to kind of paint this in a bit of a different light and sort of figure out what changes, if anything, here. John GRADEK is a lecturer at McGill's Global Aviation Leadership Program. John, first of all, the fact that he made this announcement, that itself, in and of itself, doesn't come as a surprise, right?
No, it's been talked about for months. I think that he's made statements since, summer of last year that, on various occasions he said that changes will be coming. And today was his opportunity to make those changes public.
So let's go through a couple of points here. Number one, he talked about the monetary fines changing here, and rather significantly, lots of money being thrown around. Do you think this changes anything?
Well, the money that he's throwing around, I think that the one thing he talks about is fines, and the $25,000 fine for violation of regulations to $250,000 is interesting. That in itself, should be an interesting concept. But the problem is that the CTA, who administers these fines, very rarely goes up much beyond $300, $350, $400. So they're a long way from hitting the maximum in our current regime. So, I think that, if the CTA starts to take $25,000 fines and make that the regular practice, I think we'd see some behavior changes in the industry. But to go to $250 now doesn't make much sense.
Okay, and isn't there just still an incredible backlog in terms of trying to get those claims made?
Yeah, we're up to $45,000. You got to wait 18 months if you're lucky. 24 months probably. The minister said he's going to basically reduce it from 120 days to 90 days, but that's once you start each individual's review. A 30-day handling practice. That's not going to. It's going to do everything to kind of, start individually clearing up their processes, but you still got one heck of a number of outstanding claims still out there, and this is not going to do anything to solve that problem.
Okay, so one of the other parts of that announcement from the minister was this whole idea of, lost bags. I mentioned the pileup, of course. We remember those images from not that long ago, a year or so ago. I understand that it's, you say we're going to make sure this doesn't continue to happen. We're going to hire more people. But at the end of the day, you got to wonder if you're, one of the airlines, people there listening to this, you actually really think anything is going to change?
No, I don't think so. I think
okay.
Great.
Next question.
Yeah, really.
No, it's not. No, there has to be an incentive, Natasha and Aaron, to make the airlines change their behavior. And and the incentive really, this $500 or fine or whatever it is that they're doing today is not an incentive. I think you have to change the actual behavior of how the airlines and the airports are managed. And I think that's the big issue. All of these regulations, all of these fines are there when a delay or when a cancellation happens. Let's go after trying to solve this problem and not have those delays and cancellations happen in the first place. And I think that's a management decision that has to be taken. It's an aviation management decision. All of the stuff that the minister's talking about is nice cosmetics once a delay or cancellation happens, but there's nothing in today's announcements that say we'll solve the root cause of all of these issues, which is really why do delays and why do the cancellations happen, and none of that's been talked about today. So
is there anything the minister could have announced today that would have actually effectuated real change? Like, what would you have liked to have seen in there?
Oh, I think there's a whole slew of things that he could have done. I think that, the minister, is really dealing with the symptoms rather than going after the problem. And what you'd like to be able to do is really force the airlines to really, and the airports, everybody, to basically get their act together and, create an operating environment where we're in a situation where we don't have, situations where delays and cancellations occur. The Canadian operating environment, you're now in the doldrums, and we're still operating at 70% on-time performance. The U.S. airports are in the high 80s, low 90s. I don't understand. What is it about us flying airplanes and operating airplanes in Canada that keeps us in the 70%? So and that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Let me ask you this. I'm watching a report yesterday on U.S. Airlines, and you're starting to see something happen now, and I guess this was bound to happen given the fact it's been such a difficult environment for them for the past couple of years. There are staffing cuts happening. We finished talking about the fact you can't find people to work. Airlines seem to be going out of their way to reduce staffing, reduce flights, so they can actually charge more for the flights that are getting out. So isn't part of the problem theirs?
Well, the reason you're reducing the number of flights in the U.S., like Americans dropped 35,000, United's dropped 30,000 flights, is because there's not enough people to handle the volume of flights that are being proposed. So, yeah, American Airlines and Delta and everybody is dropping flights because they've been told by the Secretary of Transportation, listen, guys, we're in trouble here. We don't have enough air traffic controllers flying into New York City, so cancel 10% of your flights. And I don't see any of that happening here in Canada. There's really, we're looking at a situation where, hopefully we don't have a repeat of summer 22 and summer 23.
Oh,
and,
your line's gone wonky, John.
Nobody's made a statement about
Okay, John, we're losing your phone connection here. If you can just
Sure.
move around or something. You're saying that the situation is not mirrored here to what it is in the U.S. But my question then would be, if it's only a matter of that, why aren't we hiring more people, or is it simply there would be too many people to hire and it would be too expensive to do it?
Oh, it's training. You can't just take somebody off the street and make them an air traffic controller. You can't take somebody off the street and make them a pilot. It really is. And, all of these jobs are very competitive. And so we're losing pilots left, right, and center to the U.S. And why is that happening? Because the U.S. salaries are so high and Canadian pilots are leaving. Same thing with air traffic controllers. So we're in a situation where we're in a highly competitive industry. The borders are very porous, and we're losing some qualified staff. And we're not replacing them fast enough. So yeah, the industry is in trouble. We're not getting people interested enough to be in aviation, and the airlines are suffering. And unfortunately, the customers are feeding the pinch when it comes to lousy service.
Well, John, thanks for painting such a rosy outlook on all of this news today. That's wonderful.
We can count on you.
It's going to get better.
Sure, it is.
Coming.
What's coming?
Summer.
Yeah, summer, and it'll be even worse for travel. That's all I keep hearing. So I'm not so sure I'm looking forward to that either. John GRADEK over at McGill. John, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Take good care. You too. All right. Look, I never even thought of that. The fact that people can leave here to go work across the border for a whole lot more money. Why would you stay here?
So our doctors, our nurses, our teachers.
And apparently our air traffic controllers.
Yeah, and pilots.
Yeah. Informative. Interactive. And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Well, we've been busy keeping our eyes on the federal workers' strike. Trouble has been brewing in another sector. Flight attendants protested across Canada this week because it turns out they work about 34 hours a month for free. They want to be paid for those hours they work. We spoke to a flight attendant who's also their union president.
Listen, I mentioned this is something when we were talking about this yesterday that has gotten a rather short shrift, I think, from people in general. When we talk about the airline industry, we know last week, of course, Omar Al-Gabra, our transport minister, announced that new passenger bill of rights, got a lot of points in it. Yet when we broke it down and, with our aviation analyst, the bottom line was, I don't think it'll change anything. Well, one of the things that needs to change is the way flight attendants are dealt with and basically taken for granted, it would seem, by the airlines in this country. There are various protests now around the country. You may not have seen these. This is happening in the middle, of course, of the public service strike. But yeah, flight attendants are out there, and they have what seems like a pretty reasonable gripe here. Did you know this stuff, that they don't get paid for this stuff? That
the minute that the door opens, they don't get paid? That, I was like, what? But they're still working.
On the job, yeah. WESLEY LESOSKY is a flight attendant, president of CUPE's airline division, and on the line right now. WESLEY, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell, because this was a surprise to us, can you let people know what the main issue here is?
Yeah, so the main issue is we're looking to get paid for all times that we're on duty and obviously representing the company in uniform. So currently the pay structure for the majority of flight attendants is that once the aircraft door is closed and the plane pushes is when we start to get paid. Until the airplane arrives and engines stop and the doors open is when we typically stop getting paid.
This seems completely nonsensical to me because you're there, you're working, you're helping people with their luggage and to find their seats. And how is this even possible, WESLEY?
Yeah, no, this is a long-standing industry practice and obviously started many, many years ago when there was something called formula pay, which would compensate a flight attendant or somebody working on the plane with an above average or higher than salary than the federal, obviously, minimum wage. and that would kind of compensate them for kind of all these extra duties that they were doing. But what we've seen, obviously, with inflation and cost of living going up and the federal minimum wage rising, is that wage is now no longer comparable. And so we're asking to be paid like anyone else that shows up to work for the hours that you work.
You're there working. You should get paid for it. Can you give us an idea of how much time we're talking about, Wesley? Because it seems to me there's quite a bit of time from people getting on the plane until the door actually closes.
Yeah, so most flight attendants have to show up an hour to an hour and a half prior to their flight, so that's when they start what's called their duty period. And then, you stay until the last passenger is off, typically. We saw extended wait periods for most of the airlines in Canada through COVID, because obviously there was a process called metering in place where, the customs halls and stuff like that didn't want to have too many people in it due to COVID, so they keep them on the plane and slowly release them. So on average, after we surveyed the 18,500 members we have in Canada working for the airlines, on average 35 hours a month.
I'm wondering, up until now, I mean, this obviously has been the way it's been since the get-go, I guess, right? Why are we only hearing about this now?
I think the big shift and the big change is like I said, the cost of living going up. The major bases that we operate out of, Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, have obviously higher cost to them. And we have a very large influx of new hires post-COVID that are kind of transitioning from one career to what they think another career at the airlines. And what we're finding is they're just not able to make ends meet at the starting salary, and it's a lot harder for them to kind of sustain that kind of full-time employment with just the one employer in the airline industry.
And what has the airline industry sort of said with respect to, whether they're prepared to do something about this? Have you had discussion? You're obviously having discussions with them now.
Yeah, so this is basically the start of a campaign that is going to be ongoing. Currently, right now, we have Air Transat, who's in bargaining with the union, and the union is obviously in bargaining with their employer. And we're pushing this issue there, hoping, obviously, to make headway. And then from there, as we bargain for the collective agreements, it's kind of twofold. We want the general public to understand what we're bargaining and why, to have their support in building on that, which we're getting immensely, which is amazing. And then just to kind of demonstrate to the employers that this is an actual hot ticket item and something that needs to be addressed through bargaining process.
Okay, and so attendants have been out picketing at some Canadian airports, including here in Montreal. Is a strike in the cards?
No, we're definitely not in a position to strike. So there's no strike. These are information pickets, and this is just to kind of advise the general public of kind of what that standard is now, what we're looking for, and why.
And is it causing any disruption?
We didn't hear of any disruptions yesterday, no. It went actually very well. We had huge public support. We had hundreds of members show up at each airport, which was amazing. And no, everything was incredibly peaceful and very professional, as it should be in our workplace.
Was that a one-off, Wesley? Will there be more of the picketing?
We're looking at different things to do in the future. So at this point, I don't know if there'll be more picketing right away, but there'll definitely be more awareness campaigns brought forward for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask what you can do to support your local flight attendant. I'm not sure what that action would be, but...
Yeah, I mean, we have a website, unpaidworkwon'tfly.ca, so you can go in there to send support as well, keep up to date with what is going on, and for sure, yeah. And always recognizing the flight attendant when they come on board, it's always good to say, hey, I hear the plight, or I hear what you're after, and I support you. It's always welcome news for sure, because it shows that we're just trying to be treated like every other Canadian and get paid for the time we're at work, right?
All right.
Yeah, for sure. Unpaidworkwon'tfly.ca.
Wesley, thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. I really appreciate having me.
You bet.
Informative,
interactive,
and always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
If you're someone who counts their steps and finds that goal of 10,000 a day hard to reach, great news. The fitness expert we spoke to says you can do way less and still reap the benefits. She'll tell you what your goal should be.
For whatever reason, I often wonder about things like this when it comes to fitness. Someone comes up with a rule or a goal and a number and says, well, okay, we all accept it and go, oh, that sounds reasonable. And now, of course, so many people have like fitness watches that can count your steps. And the magic number, for whatever reason, was always 10,000 steps. If you did your 10,000 steps over the course of a day, you were considered, to be at least trying to stay fit. Turns out that was just a made-up random number. It's not 10,000 steps. Jill Barker wrote about this in a Gazette column, and she's on the line right now. Jill, the good news is it's less than 10,000 steps. Maybe some people think it ought to be a whole lot more, but it's not. And it's a pretty interesting study that proved that, right?
Yeah, it's 7,000 steps, which is great news for those days when you're hoping for 10 and don't quite make it. So yeah, it was a great study, and they looked at really longevity and realized that 7,000 steps was the magic number. And even those people who did 10,000 didn't actually receive any additional health benefits for going the extra 3,000.
No way.
Yeah.
No way.
It's perfect. We saved you 3,000 steps today.
Okay. But then let's talk about what the health benefits are from doing the 7,000.
Yeah, so the 7,000 is a reduction in risk of all-cause mortality. So it just means, you have a greater longevity. So you've improved your chances of living longer, which is, pardon the pun, a step in the right direction. And something else that was, I thought, very interesting for this study, and keep in mind that 7,000 steps isn't like no chump change, right? You still have to work to get 7,000 steps. But what I thought was also interesting, it didn't matter how fast you walked. So in terms of just, improved longevity. And that's a great news for all of you strollers out there.
Yeah, that idea that you have to sort of keep a meaningful pace up when you're out there. You see people flailing their arms, no benefit, no anything, just do your steps, and that's really all you need to do. That's pretty great news.
And keep in mind, too, that it's cumulative over the course of the day, right? So you don't have to do your 7,000 steps all at once.
By the way, if you want to do stairs to help with your steps, that's even better for you.
Yeah, I mean, if you let's be very clear that if you walk faster, you could have additional benefits. Cardiovascular health could improve, et cetera, et cetera. But they didn't look at that in this study. They really looked at, longevity, and so that's what they found out. And interesting too, this was a group of middle-aged adults. So a lot of these studies are done on older people. So that's good news because older people tend to have greater health benefits for less exercise.
I'm liking all of this. Yeah. So 7,000, not 10,000. You can go at the pace that you like, and you can break it up. It's not like you have to go do, 7,000 all at once. This is all good news. Very encouraging.
There you go. And I'm just going to top up that good news to say that the people who benefited the most from health-wise were the people who went from kind of the lowest number of steps to the medium amount of steps. So that means that anybody who's sitting at home saying, like, I can't do it or it's not worth it, it is.
First step you take is beginning of, I guess, getting better. And as you said, Jill, dealing with these other health issues that perhaps you don't think about or wouldn't have known about by doing something as simple as walking. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to work out with weights necessarily. Just doing that provides tremendous benefits.
Yeah.
And Jill, when you say, so I had to look it up. I'm like, how far is 7,000 steps? When you say it's no lightweight action, nonetheless,
it's a walk.
It's 5.6 kilometers.
Yeah, but over the course of the day.
Yes.
Over the course of the day, yeah. So, I walk my dog about a kilometer in the morning and maybe just under that in the evening. So, you're getting there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all you got to do.
Well, it's better than 10.
It is a step.
Sometimes it just happens, right? You do have to
make the effort.
Plan those extra steps.
Yeah, and I think once you're out there doing it and then really getting into it, you're like, you know what, I can do another 100 or 200 or 500. I think hopefully it's cumulative, especially for people, as you said, who get the benefit at the bottom of that scale. Just starting to do it seems to me taking that big first step. So,
absolutely.
Jill, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure.
All right.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
How does $20 million in gold just vanish into thin air? It's a story that doesn't sound like real life, but it is. It's not a movie. It happened at the Toronto airport last week, and no one seems to know how.
A story that kind of caught everybody by surprise a bit last week. It's not the kind of thing you imagine would happen here. It's like a U.S. heist of some kind or a big European heist. $20 million of gold and other valuables disappeared from Toronto Pearson Airport after a plane was offloaded. It's a week or so later. I've not heard a single thing, a single clue, a single lead from anyone in the story. However, maybe that's changed. Jeff Siskind is executive producer of the True North Heist podcast, which covers stories like these that have happened in Canada, and of course is all over this story. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So am I wrong? Have you heard anything, any kind of a lead, any kind of an explanation as to how or why this might have happened?
I have theories, but to be clear, I'm a podcast producer and not an investigator. So I'm like you. I'm just sitting on the sidelines, maybe with a slightly more glee, given sort of my interest in it. But I'm just watching it unfold as if it's a great Hollywood heist film.
So the only thing I saw was the day of, or I guess, or the next day, I saw Toronto police hold a press conference and offer absolutely no information whatsoever. So that was not the most informative press conference you could have held. So you're following this as an observer. What have you seen? What have you heard?
Well, so what I've seen is probably what you've heard. The interesting thing that came out just yesterday is that the company that, was transferring the gold was Brinks. It was a private company. But other than that, these cases, unless there's sort of a mistake being made, they don't usually get solved. And, there are a couple, and certainly what we do on the podcast, there's a couple of famous cases that happened in Canada that got solved, but they got solved because there was just a problem in the plan. But for the most cases, these are kind of done by geniuses. Our interest in these stories are because of Hollywood films like Ocean's 11 or, there's a whole countless other. But you have these George Clooney-like characters who are at the helm of this thing who sit and they watch and they calculate and they find a flaw in the system and figure out a way to exploit it. And the plans are usually so tight, things go wrong, just like in the movies, but the plans usually work. And, when you come to something like gold, it may never be solved because the gold, more than likely, it's probably already been melted down and shipped somewhere else.
That's crazy.
That's maybe the end of the story.
Is this likely to be, not that we would know, maybe it's an unfair question, is this likely to be one person's stash or someone trying to move this money? Is it corporate? Do we have any idea?
We don't. As someone who enjoys stories, I can look at precedent stories, and it's probably not one person. And it's probably not one person for a variety of reasons, one of which, we see, Danny Ocean, Ocean's 11 putting together a gang. These things need multiple people to work. Yeah. So you need your mastermind. You need your person on the inside. It's a small thing, but you need a driver. You need a fence, somebody who can figure out how to turn this into cash. You need all of these things. So it's definitely not one person. And it's just also a logistical thing. Gold is really, really heavy. And so this isn't just someone, sticking a little gold in their pocket and walking off. This is $20 million worth of gold. So you're going to have a level of organization, whether it's sort of organized crime in the way we traditionally think of it, or, someone putting together a posse to pull off a massive heist. It's definitely not a lone criminal.
Jeff, you touched on the aspect that there has to be somebody on the inside. So what do we know? Do we know anything about, because we heard little bits and pieces about this being an inside job. What do we know about that front? So
I think we don't know. And this is, if I were the police or I were an investigator, this is the place people usually look because, in lieu of fingerprints or video evidence or anything else left at the crime, what you can be sure of is somebody knew that gold would be there, and somebody knew that gold would be there that day and at that location. And the genius of all these things is that they're always, as I said before, they're looking for that gooey flaw in the system. And so here you have the gold lands. It's taken to a sort of off-site location, a warehouse, where there isn't the same level of security that an airport regularly would have. And there lies opportunity. While the gold's there for probably not a very long period of time, somebody knew that this is their moment. So, if I were police, that's what I would be looking into is who knew that gold would be in that location and that, not very secure location at that time. And it's not going to be a long list of people. Are they going to find it? Who knows? But that's where I'm sure investigators are starting their investigation. So
how do we compare, given that this is what you kind of do, look into these sort of heists, what does this compare to that most recently happened in Canada? Anything like it at all?
Well, probably my favorite, and I'm glad to be talking with the Montreal station, is, of course, the Great Maple Syrup Heist, which happened in 2012, which, the heist that just happened at the Toronto airport, $20 million. Previously, it broke the record because the maple syrup heist, as people may remember, was estimated somewhere a street value of about $18 million. So you have, a similar kind of setup where you had here where I don't know how much you know about the details of this, but there's a federation in Quebec, the Quebec Federation of Maple Syrup Producers, that holds all this maple syrup in a warehouse. This warehouse similar to the warehouse where this gold was taken from, was not particularly well secured. I think in the case of this, the maple syrup warehouse was spectacularly unwell, secured. And so there was the flaw in the system where, through many, many people, I think there was 3 or 4 central people, they began moving barrels, 600-pound barrels of maple syrup from the warehouse. And ultimately there was a barrel roller involved who could sell the stuff on the black market. Yeah. And, unlike gold, maple syrup, actually similar to gold, also very, very hard to trace and could have just, gone by the wayside, except for the fact, very, very similar to this. The first place they looked was, who are we renting this land from? Who knows about this warehouse? And so it was the person who actually rented the land the warehouse was on, ended up being the key to unlocking the rest of the crime in that case.
I'm just wondering, in this case, in terms of the gold heist, has someone stepped forward to say, hey, where's my gold?
I don't know. And what's even kookier about this is we never know because, like these things are, they're crimes. There are people who are losing. In terms of raw gold, there's not a lot of emotional attachment to raw gold. And my understanding is that Brinks has stepped up and there's probably an insurance claim to be made. So, I don't know, I don't know. There was gold in other things is the way the police are talking about it. I don't know what the other things were.
Probably in terms of syrup,
gold, people will not be out of pocket for that. There will be, they can buy more bars of gold.
Okay.
So, obviously $20 million gold heists are not happening every day, but you've got a podcast about heists. So is this happening on a smaller level on a fairly regular basis?
Well, it is, Canada has this weird history of sort of similar kinds of gold heists. There was one story we told, a guy named Ken Leishman, who in the 60s, he was known as the Gentleman Bandit. He was a dapper man with a trim mustache. He was also known as the Flying Bandit. And part of how he got that nickname is he used to fly planes, but he also used to spend a lot of time at airports, including the Winnipeg airport, where he noticed that regularly, about once a month, a shipment would come from Red Lake, which is in northern Ontario, where they mine the gold, to the Winnipeg airport, where this shipment would stand on the tarmac for about an hour or two, and then get shipped into an Air Canada plane and sent to the mint. So he sort of thought, there's maybe something I can do with that information. And so he got together a gang. He bought some coveralls. He stenciled the Air Canada logo on the coveralls. He stole some Air Canada waybills. He stole an Air Canada truck. And when that gold, and he got a inside man that was in Red Lake saying, okay, big shipment's coming. There he was on the tarmac when the shipment came in. He drove out to meet the plane. He's like, hey, you know what? There's been a change of plan. Here's the waybill. I'm going to take that gold and we're going to ship it on the new flight. He took that gold and he drove it right to his own car, where he put it in the trunk and drove it away.
So simple, hey? Like so seemingly simple. So then I just wonder, you have this podcast. I can't wait to check it out. I'm wondering if you're taking notes, Jeff. Like, why are you so interested?
I'm so interested as a fan. I don't have it in me. Like, I don't think that way. There's a certain genius to this. And I also really don't want to go to jail.
There you go.
Another good reason.
I appreciate them as stories. The stories that we tell on our podcast, which also just worth being known is available on Audible. The stories that we tell the stories of people that got caught because then we know the details of the stories. And, often they spend 10, 20 years in prison. That's not my bag.
Fair enough.
The podcast is True North Heists, as in Heists. You can check that out. And I'm sure once there's any kind of progress in this one, you'll have something up on that. Hey, Jeff, how likely is it that George Clooney is involved? No, I take that back. I'm sorry.
I can't say either way.
I know, you can't. Jeff, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
Great, thanks so much.
Jeff Siskind, True North Heist podcast, and the basic answer to everything we asked was, we don't know.
I get the intrigue, though. It's out of a movie.
Pretty crazy. That wraps up another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand, along with Natasha Hall, and we will see you next week.
Have a great week.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.